and then the bad management of France's cultural heritage sites. If it wasn't about how the actual dealing with the fire was done, for safety regulations during the work that was done at Notre-Dame, that they believe now was the reason why this fire actually took off, to the donations. That maybe is the controversy that has, created most, I don't know, fire and fury, I would say.
Famous billionaires gave hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros.
In 48 hours, €1 billion was collected to the reconstruction of Notre-Dame. And then, of course, started the debate about, we now have all these funds, and which many said that this is enough funds to rebuild the cathedral. But then how are we going to rebuild it?
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to rebuild it the way it was when it burnt down? Are we going to make it a modern? The only instructions from the executive was that we will make it even more beautiful than before. That was what Emmanuel Macron said.
And within 5 years, it will be ready for
and
the
then we
Olympic
came
Games.
exactly, and then to the next controversy is, how quickly will this cathedral be rebuilt? Because then Emmanuel Macron launched only days after the fire that within 5 years, which means that in time for the 2024 Paris Olympics, the cathedral will be rebuilt. Stéphane, is this a realistic?
Well, that was also one of the very hot topics because he said it like not even 24 hours after the fire, I think. And that was also interesting. Suddenly, everybody in France became an expert on heritage. It was like the World Cup football when suddenly you have 68 million coaches who know exactly how you should play.
People know everything about how to build a cathedral, how to. I mean, the US president even told us how to take out a fire.
He knows everything.
Yes,
He's just wonderful.
True.
I spoke to many experts. I spoke to
real experts.
Real experts. Yeah, sorry,
not only the experts in the avenue downstairs.
I actually spoke to the world famous architect Dominique Perrault. He is the architect who designed the National Library here in Paris. And 2 years ago, he designed a master plan for the Île de la Cité, which is the island where the Notre-Dame is standing. So he really studied the whole area, not necessarily the building, but the area very thoroughly. And this is what he said about the rebuilding of the Notre-Dame.
On a construit le Grand Palais en 2 ans. Donc peut-être que c'est 5 ans, c'est peut-être même trop. Tout dépend ce que l'on veut faire et l'énergie que l'on veut mettre dans l'ouvrage.
Well, there he said, we've built the Grand Palais in 2 years, so maybe 5 years is enough. Maybe it's even too long.
Yeah, he's very optimistic. Yeah, but the real experts, of course, he's an architect. But the real experts, of course, are those who restore monuments. I also spoke to heritage architect Marie-Amélie Tech. She has been restoring, for instance, the bridge Alexandre III in the heart of Paris. So she really knows what she's talking about. And this is what she said to me.
Even the best engineers who are working there now are not able to answer the question. So I think it's really his political agenda. It's just communication.
So yes, what do you think, Sarah, as an expert on communication? Did Macron talk too quickly?
Yes, I think he did, for several reasons. Well, and I think it was unfortunate in the sense that, Notre-Dame has been a cathedral, or has been there for more than 800 years. It has evolved, it has changed, it has been, it hasn't been the same cathedral throughout these hundreds of years. And I think that cultural heritage sites should be allowed to change and to develop, but we cannot do that without thinking and without taking our time to actually we shouldn't just throw something out because there is a big sporting event planned in 5 years. I think it's a shame. I think it's too quick. Because it's not only a question about rebuilding, and that is what many are saying. We need to think about how we're going to rebuild this cathedral, and will it be, will it be the same? Will it be different? Should it be modernized? Should we use different type of construction materials? Because that's also one thing. And and there you have a debate only there, and I think it's important to have that debate. And why should we just plow in 1 billion euros in 5 years on something that may not be, what we will want in 100 years. Yeah. So I think I think it was too quick, and I think it's it's unfortunate because it also gives people the impression that Notre-Dame is it's only for tourists, and it's only a question of a building, a commercial palace in some way. And, we shouldn't forget that after all, Notre-Dame is a cathedral. It's a living cathedral. It's one that has mass every week, several a week, I even think. And where, it's not just a building and it has a real internal life and an importance for people who are Christian Catholics, and maybe they should have their say as well. It should not only be the tourism office of Paris deciding, when and how this should be done.
Yeah. I think the political agenda has nothing to do with the agenda of the building. It's just a couple of years in politics, and like you said, Notre-Dame. Almost 1,000 years.
Yes, and hopefully it will still stand there in another couple of 100 years. So it seems like a shame, very sad to rush off with something that hopefully will last much, much longer than a presidential mandate.
Yeah, that's for sure. This week, they were able to put a cover on the roof. So that's a temporary cover against the rain. But it will take another 4 months at least to secure the site. They will probably robots will start cleaning up the rubble inside the church, because it's still too dangerous for human beings to get into the church. So that will take at least another 4 months. And then, the reflection on how we are going to restore and then rebuild. So it's going to be very long. So I'm sure we will talk about the Notre-Dame in So French, at least somewhere in the next 1,000 years.
I was about to say. Now, 2 stories in French media this week, making us ask maybe how things are actually standing with the country's press freedom. Stéphane, we have 2 stories, so I'm going to do them one by one. First of all is the story about Gaspard Glans. Yeah. Who is this guy, and why is he in the media this week?
Now, Gaspard Glans is an independent journalist and cameraman who has been covering a lot of demonstrations and also the Yellow Vest movement as well. But he was also involved in releasing a lot of videos on the Benalla affair. Now, he was in Paris, as every Saturday last week during the Yellow Vests protest. He received a grenade near his feet, and he was angry at the police officer. So he raised his middle finger, and then he was arrested.
Very brutally.
Very brutally indeed. And not only that, he was held for 48 hours with no food and just water. And then he received a court order that he was not allowed to enter Paris anymore until October on Saturday. And if he will, then he will be put in prison. So this, of course, was very controversial. All the media that immediately supported Gaspard Glans, of course, because although he is a freelance journalist, he's still a journalist. And well, we didn't hear a lot about the government, right? Because it's quite a scandal that a journalist in a Western democracy.
But this comes just a couple of months after the new laws regarding anti-casseurs, the black blocs, etc., has been voted through Parliament, and where these quite tough measures are being put in place to protect law and order. And the warnings from many have been just this exact thing that, these laws that are actually made for to be against black blocs or extreme elements of society are being used against those who are just against the authorities, but without, being violent or breaking any actual laws. And Gaspard Glance, you could say, well, he's a journalist. Why is he not protected by press freedom laws? Well, the problem here is that Gaspard Glance he's a journalist. He works and he sells his images to almost all major media outlets in France. But he doesn't have his press card, because to have a press card in France, you have to be employed by a media outlet. And as a freelance journalist today, it's very complicated. And everybody knows that, being a journalist in general is quite difficult to make a living from. So many journalists actually don't have the right to even apply for a press card, or it's very complicated, just because of how they get money for their work. So he doesn't have a press card, which means that, he's not considered as a journalist by the authorities.
Yeah, that's of course a very strange situation, because it's freedom of press, freedom of speech. So you don't need it to have a press card to be a journalist. But in reality, journalists in France are not really taken seriously without this press card, which is issued by the union. Then there were also questions. I mean, the police clearly knew who he was. The question is, was he targeted? Because he released a lot of material related to the Benalla affair, which really embarrassed the Élysée. So was he targeted by the police? He was on first name terms with the police commissioner. And
then you can also ask yourself a question. I mean, of course, he said himself that he regretted the fact that he pointed the finger at the police, but he was very upset by having received this grenade. But you could also maybe think that police officers at frontline in these kind of very, very tense situations should maybe be a little bit more thin-skinned than reacting with, that roughly on just someone pointing the finger at them. Even though it's not a defendable act at all. But I mean, in these kind of situations, I think people both say and maybe do things non-violently that are maybe not the best things, but
but the French police is very touchy and very badly trained compared to other European police forces. So there's violence everywhere, which also reflects the huge conflicts in this society. But it's a very bad precedent, of course. There was also another journalist arrested. I think he was released on the same day. But it says something about the freedom of press. We also had another affair this week. The investigative website Disclose released a classified report that had been leaked, maybe by the Ministry of Defense, but that's not clear. This report showed that the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen has made much wider use of exported French arms than officials in Paris acknowledged. These arms, like tanks and laser-guided missile systems, are sold to Saudi Arabia and used by the Saudi-led coalition that is fighting Iran-backed rebels in Yemen, and killing, of course, civilians. Now, with this involvement in the war under new scrutiny, the three journalists, they published this report. And what happened then?
Well, they've been called in. They received an order to actually appear at the intelligence services here in France to explain themselves how they received this information and from whom. Most importantly, and I mean the thing is, the question about French arms being used in the war in Yemen is an old story, and this has been denounced by human rights organizations for years. What's interesting in this case is this is the first time there is actual real beginning of real proof that the French authorities are aware that these arms are used in the actual fighting, and how and where these French arms are deployed in this war. So it's a first physical type of evidence, and you could. What is the defense of these journalists is that this is of a major importance for the French public to know. That because first of all, it's illegal because you are not allowed to sell guns, weapons, according to international treaties, to a conflict where civilians can get killed. And So it's illegal, and then and also towards the French public, French authorities has consistently denied that these guns and arms are being used on the ground. They've been saying they're only used in defensive situations. So it's a very important information for the French public and for the world